Washington, this is VOA News. European space probe lands on Comet. Afghan opium production soars. I'm Ray Kouguell reporting from Washington. A European Space Agency probe made a historic landing on a comet, but its status remains unclear after harpoons failed to anchor it to the surface. ESA officials say the lander, known as Philae, touched down Wednesday on Comet 67P after a 7-hour descent from its orbiting mothership Rosetta. But during the free fall to the comet's surface, harpoons designed to anchor the probe failed to deploy. Officials say the craft may have briefly lifted off after the initial landing before touching back down again. Lisa Bryant reports on the climax of a decade-long trip.
It was celebration time at the European Space Agency's mission control in Darmstadt, Germany. After tense hours monitoring their computer screens, controllers finally got the signals they were hoping for, showing that the 100-kilogram Philae spacecraft had landed on Comet 67P. The touchdown is a first in space history. The landing is the culmination of a 10-year, 6 billion-kilometer journey across space by ESA's Rosetta spacecraft to reach the comet. Lisa Bryant, Paris.
By exploring the comet, scientists hope to get insights into the earliest phases of our solar system. The U.S. military says it's conducted 16 airstrikes in Syria since Monday, most around the heavily contested town of Kobani near the Turkish border. The U.S. Central Command says 10 of the strikes hit 8 Islamic State units, damaged 3 fighting positions, and destroyed an Islamic State logistics facility. The U.S. military also says 7 other airstrikes were carried out on Islamic State units in oil-producing regions in northern Iraq. This is VOA News. The World Health Organization says the number of people who have died of the Ebola virus is now more than 5,000 out of just over 14,000 cases. WHO report says the actual death toll is likely far higher, as many people are reluctant to seek treatment for the virus. President Obama is in Myanmar, also known as Burma, where regional leaders have opened the annual summit meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Mr. Obama is expected to hold talks this week with President Thein Sein and opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Earlier in Beijing, President Obama and China's President Xi Jinping reached agreement on reducing greenhouse gas emissions to combat climate change. President Obama says the U.S. agreed to cut emissions by 26 to 28% by 2025. President Xi Jinping says his country's CO2 emissions would peak by 2030. The UN peacekeeping chief is urging the Security Council to extend the mandate of its 7,000-member peacekeeping force in Liberia. Margaret Bashir has more.
Head of UN peacekeeping Hervé Ladsous told the Security Council on Wednesday that plans to continue to gradually draw down the mission have been put on hold as Liberia struggles to cope with an Ebola outbreak that has killed more than 2,800 people.
We are of the view that it would be appropriate to extend the mandate of UNMIL until September 2015.
The mission has been in the West African country for more than a decade, helping the authorities rebuilding and developing capacity of state institutions and maintaining law and order. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, the United Nations.
The United Nations says opium production in Afghanistan hit a new high this year, raising questions about the internationally funded counter-narcotic strategy in the country. Ayaz Gul has details.
The UN Office on Drugs and Crime says the opium harvest in Afghanistan jumped 17% from last year, and the increased cultivation could produce up to 6,400 tons of narcotics. The UN agency's regional representative, André Avetsion, called for finding better ways to fight drugs inside and beyond Afghanistan, together with the Afghan government.
Without tackling the problem of drugs seriously, no serious economic achievement is possible.
Avetsion said political will and readiness are needed from the Afghan government and people for the anti-drugs fight to succeed. Ayaz Gul for VOA News, Islamabad.
Israeli authorities have given preliminary approval for the construction of 200 new homes in a Jewish area of East Jerusalem. The move comes at a time of already heightened tensions with Palestinians. There's been no immediate comment from Palestinian officials. I'm Ray Kouguell in Washington.
That's the latest world news from VOA.